Welcome to the Tzurba M'Rabanan Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, here we go with the second Shiur in volume number 22 of the Tzurba M'Rabanan series in Hilchot Shabbos. This is the Dr. Harold and Magda Katz volume. Many different halachas discussed. The first one being giving birth on Shabbos and getting ready for the birth before. Last week we spoke about what one has to do before the Shabbos to be able to get ready. What are the responsibilities? You have to go near the hospital. We said no. Are you allowed to go away to a family simcha? We said yes. All the different halachas. At what point does a woman become a chola sheish basakana in terms of giving birth? There's hilchas nida and there's hilchas Shabbos. We spoke about malachas traveling to the hospital. So here we go. We're up to page 36, the second half of that discussion, and that is starting with putting the mother at ease during birth. That's on page 36. You have it there. So the Gemara tells us in Masechah Shabbos that we know that one is allowed to do any malacha that one needs to do for the good of the refuah of the patient. But and that's what we saw in terms of if they need light and if they need obviously any type of medicine. But the chiddush the Gemara tells us in Shabbos Kuf Chav Ches is that even if it's not directly connected to the refuah, the physical refuah of the patient, but even the mental state of the patient, that's good enough. That's good enough. So the Brisa says, Amar Mari, so source 24, the Brisa said that if the woman needs a candle, then you're allowed to light a candle. Ask the Gemara Pshita, that's obvious. Any malacha. What's the chiddush of a candle? Any malacha that she needs for her welfare is allowed. Answer, Lo tzricha besuma, even if it's a blind woman. A blind woman does not need any light in order for her care, for her own personal. But she is calmer by knowing that there's light for other people who could take care of her. And that's the chiddush. Ma'od says the Gemara. Kiva de lo chazia aser. You might think, well, she can't use the light, so it's aser. That's not directly affecting her refuah. Kamash malan isuve misvadaita. Right? It calms her. Savra. She thinks yika midi chazia chaver tavavdali. If my friend, sees something, they'll take care of it. So calming down the state, the mentality of a patient is included in the chola sheish bo sakana allowance. The Shulchan Aruch paskins this way. In Shin Lamed, remember that's the siman about Yoledas. Yoledas hika chola sheish bo sakana. U'machalan ala Shabbos l'chol ma shetzricha. You're machal Shabbos whatever she needs. Koren la chachama mimakom lamakom u'mayalden osa u'malikan laner afilu hi suma. Even if she is blind, she doesn't need it. And the Levush clarifies this, that even though it's not directly connected to the medical care, Afilu en anapshem mesaskos imatzrichos lener, says the Levusha. Yechol lisasik imakol tzarcha balona. They don't need it. Still, it's miyasheves liba. Whatever could calm her down. Again, it's if there's some very, very extreme things that she wants in order to calm her down. We could try to calm her down in other ways. But in this type of case where it's directly connected, not directly connected, but directly connected to her general mental state, so then that would be allowed. The Chazon Ish discusses also in a letter in the Kovetz Igrus, Chazon Ish source 27, Binyan Nesia Yoledas B'Shabbos Hadavar B'Hipoch Mizarei Zanish Yisuima. People going in the ambulance, people going in the car with the woman with the Yoledas, that is for sure allowed because that calms her down. Besides the fact that she might need. But even without that, she might need, but it's to calm her down, and that applies to any chola sheish bo sakana that has to go to the hospital or do anything on Shabbos. The mental state is crucial. Says the Shiur Shabbos, source 28. Mutter lekarov mishpacha o lekol adam acher. A family member or anyone else sheyesh lechola imun, but that the chola has imun in them. Again, not because if the Yoledis doesn't need her mother, but the mother needs to be there because I have to know what's going on and when I'm going to have the grandchild. You can't go in the car or in the ambulance for the mother's sake. If the daughter's sake, for the daughter's sake. So it's a mutter for a karo mishpacha or for anyone else that the chola has imun bo. Linsoa yachad imo lebeit cholim kadei lavoso. to travel in the ambulance to the hospital. Even if there's already somebody else in the ambulance that can help, it doesn't matter. If she wants the karov mishpacha for the mental calmness, she can. So why? Because they're choshesh shema titrov daito shalachola. Maybe the chola will have tir fadas if she is not accompanied, or he in any type of case of chola sheish pasakana. V'hitiru afilu chola atzmo avakishos. Even if the chola doesn't ask for it, if you know it will calm the chola, so then it is allowed. The yasaraki and even more. Im ein makom b'mechonit l'karov mishpacha l'lavod l'chola beit cholim. What if there's no room in the ambulance, no room in the car that's taking the patient? Says the Shiur Shabbos. They could go in a separate car. They could go in a separate car with all the malachas that entails. To get to the hospital, to be with the patient. L'shem shipur hargashaso, in order to improve the hargasha, the feeling. Or to give important details to the chola. Whatever it is, that is allowed. That's also. The patient can take whatever they might need in the hospital. So there's no tir for that. Whatever is needed can be taken. Whatever you can do with the shinui is best to, but whoever wants to go, whoever the patient would be calmer if they went, is allowed to go. Rav Elazar Malamed, right, the Pnei Halacha, is very questioning and unclear of how many people could go. To have one person to go in the ambulance with her, then fine. But to have more, he is not a fan of that. He thought it's excessive, and you don't need both. To have the Pnei Halacha, the mother and the husband and the doula. So many poskim say, yeah. Each of them serve a different purpose. The husband should go to give moral support, but at a certain stage in the birthing process, the husband can't be useful too much. So the mother and the doula, obviously professional. But the Pnei Halacha thinks that he knows that there are others that argue with him, but he notes that if you can limit it, that's his view. Right in source 29. Pnei Halacha. B'shonim achronos yeshnon yoldos shemevakshos shegama baal v'gama ima yisu ima lebeit cholim. Both the mother and the husband. The Yeshem of Akshos Leazar Gam B'tomechas Leida Dula, also a midwife or someone who helps with the birth. Avakivan she'ein bazet tzarach refu'i hakashur latzal tafashos, says Rav Malamed. Since I don't think it's directly connected to save a life. Rak milaveh echad yachol esarv l'nesiya. I think one's enough. Habal oa'em otomechas leida. V'rak big mikrim charigim. On unusual cases, kasher yoledis nechreses the hysteria for tavas shegabal v'gam ima yisuma, she'll be hysterical. Yuchlu shteim l'nsoa, they can both go. V'gam achmas charadasa hidavash yazikos tomechas leida, and also if she really needs the doula there, you could answer. But you should try to arrange it maybe before Shabbos, that they'll be there. The Yesh Chalkin, the Pnei Halacha acknowledges and says there are those that are more makel than me. The Sovrim shetzorach leanos l'bakash le'yoledis, whatever she wants. Gam kasher ain't hysterical, even if she's not hysterical. But she just wants it. Shem tirtza sheyisu ima ba'ila ve'ima v'tbechas leida yisu kulam k'dei liyashev adaita. They could all go in order to keep her mental state calm. Ula daitam, according to them, mutar gam laharich hasanasiyach de laviyam. And this is the minhag of many. They'll pick up the woman in birth, having a baby, and then they'll go to the mother-in-law, the mother's house in order to pick up the mother, meaning to stretch the trip. Oles kasher aleim to call kadesh yisu b'kochos atzman lebeit cholim. So that they go. Ulam nirish is a pinuk mugzam. He thinks that it's an extra pinuk. He doesn't think so. Minag Ravach, he thinks the minag is only one malaveh. Maybe in his yishuv it's the minag. I think in other places the minag is the husband and the mother and the doula. And the doula goes usually by herself if she's somewhere else and she meets them there. So I don't know what he says the minag is, but I think the minag in other places is the opposite. In the Sefer Puah, he quotes that if she needs the doula, then the doula could go even by herself. Another chiddush, but again, it's obvious if you really think about it. One should try to arrange before Shabbos, if there are other young children in the house, that somebody should be there. If it's a Shabbos, somebody should be there, so that if the husband and the wife have to go to the hospital, they can leave the young children with the whoever is there. But what if they made arrangements? So they didn't make arrangements, now they're little kids. What are you supposed to do with little kids? You can't leave them by themselves. That's a situation of pikuach nefesh for the kids. So therefore, you can be mechal, you can put them in the car and take them somewhere, or call somebody to get somebody to come there. That's what it says in the halachas of pregnancy and childbirth, here on page 39. It is preferable that a woman in her 9th month of pregnancy arrange for someone to stay with her children in case she will have to go to the hospital on Shabbos or Yontif. However, if she cannot leave them with a neighbor, and no other arrangements are possible, right, let's say there's nobody else, nobody can stay here, it is permissible to take them by car and leave them by a friend or a relative, even if they're on not the direct route to the hospital. The Aruch HaShabbos also, this is not something that is argued upon. The Aruch HaShabbos also, as well, says this in Parachaf, in source 32. The Yesh Lahakpid, try, Shalola Hashir Yiladim Kladim Levad Babayis, try. Be careful not to, it's dangerous. Can't leave little kids in the house by themselves. Elo Hachin Me'erev Shabbos, Eso Efsharis Lashgacha Ayiladim, arrange from before Shabbos to have a plan. Need a plan. If there's nobody there, you live in a community, and there's nobody that can stay at your house. And if you go to labor, then you could have to, then they'll help. It's best if you could take them by a non-Jewish driver, and therefore you can bring them even Aydin Nahag Yisrael if one needs to. What about if it's a further hospital? You have to go to the closest hospital. Right, the answer again is no. That's part of the mental state. Just like you take an extra person, if the hospital, if the woman wants to give birth in is farther away, that's the hospital you go to. And most women have a specific hospital they want to go to. Mutter lioleda, says the Aruch HaShabbos. Linso ala beit cholim miruchak yoter. Further, amanas laleda sham, to give birth there, imdaita somechas yoser ala rofim. She thinks the care is better and the medical staff is better. Mutter lezek ro b'shabbos l'rofei prati. And she could even call a private doctor if that's the one that she wants, even if there's a staff in the hospital. Even if there's expert staff, she wants this one. If she wants this doctor, so then that can be called. But the Rav Rosner notes that you could go to the father hospital and make all the arrangements, but it has to be for a medical-related issue. What if you want to go to the father hospital because you're going to be there for 3 days and the hashkach is better? That's not a reason you can be Machal Shabbos more. That's not a reason. So bring food from outside. Right? So the Shevet HaLevi says, yes, you can go to the further hospital if it's for a medical reason, but not for a food reason. 34. Bazet Sorach Shikol Hadas. Kiluf Amim. Omrim Kain. Sometimes people say this. Rak Bishvil Tamim Sheina Maspikim. Al Pi Alacha. Umachal Shabbos Lo Tzorach Klal. For no real reason, umikol shekeng sheomrim sheberachok hamachal kasher umuhudar yoser she'ein zetam lachal Shabbos. You can't have a chal Shabbos for that. In general, if the hospital has higher halachic standards in general, not just the food that they serve, but in general, Sir Malamed says, okay, Shari Tzedek, everyone wants to go to Shari Tzedek if they think that that's a more halachic hospital than another hospital, then one could go there for the general care, but not specifically for the food that is served. So that is all, again, pre-birth. Pre-birth, and get ready for the birth and what has to be done, and during the birth. What about after the birth? What about after the birth? So after the birth, we know a woman is still considered a chol sheish bo sakana, right? She's a chol sheish bo sakana before the birth. We spoke last time about at what stage, and we were makel, like all three of the opinions. So what about how far does it go? How late does it go? How long after psichas hakever, the opening of the womb, do we say that she is chol sheish bo sakana? So the Gemara says 3 stages. 3, 7, 30. 3 stages. Says the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Chavtes. Source number 36. Ad masai psichas hakever. How long is psichas hakever? Until how long? Amar Abaya Shlosha Yamim. Rava Amar Mishmei Rav Yehuda Shiva. V'Yamri La Shloshim. 3, 7, and 30. 3 different halachas. Amri Nardoi. They're all right. It's just a difference in halacha. Chaya Shlosha Shivim V'Shloshim. There are 3 stages by a woman who had a baby. Shlosha. The first 3 days after she has a baby, she's a chol sheish bo sakana, period. Do anything, a darbanan, daraisa, anything. Bein shamar tzrichani, bein shalom tzrichani, v'chalan av the Shabbos. Even if she hasn't asked for it, can be Mechal Shabbos for a woman who just had a baby within the first 3 days. Shiva between day 4, 5, 6, and 7. The next 4 days. So then it depends if she asks for it. Amr tzrichani, if she expresses that she wants something, so then one can give her, one can be Mechal Shabbos for her, Mechal Nafza Shabbos. Amr lo tzrichani, ein Mechal Nafza Shabbos. But if she says, I don't want it, after 3, she has that option. After 7 days, shloshim afil amr tzrichani, Mechal Nafza Shabbos. After 7 days, that she's like, generally, everybody, achol she'ein bo sakana. She goes down a level, once the halacha achol she'ein bo sakana, a guy could do malacha. Right? Osa de aramai. Right? A Gentile could do malacha after 7 days. Right? It comes up by fasting. Right? How, when a woman had a baby, how much before Tisha B'Av? How much before Yom Kippur? Right? That's always a question. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes this Gemara, quotes these 3 levels. The first 3 days, no matter what, Mechal Shabbos for her, within 3 days. If she says, I don't need, you're not Mechal, afterwards, after 7 days, then you try to calm her down, because she no longer has a status of Chol She'ish Basakana in a normal, regular case, but he has a status of Chol She'ein Basakana. When do the 3 days start and the 7 days? How do you count them? How do you count the 3 and the 7 and the 30? Says the Rush, you go by the birth. Whenever the birth was, you count 7 days from that birth. 3 days, 7 days from that birth, what we call me'es la'es. From the event to the event, from the moment to the moment. The Mechal of the Shabbos, Shivas Yom me'es la'es, says the Rush in Baba Kama. The Trumas Hadeshen is not so convinced, right? Late Rishon says the Trumas Hadeshen, Yisrael Yisraelin, 39. The Nira, the Toch, you know why it's called the Trumas Hadeshen? Because there are 355 questions and answers given. That's why Hadeshen is the gematria, and the scholars say that it's one of the only tshuvas from that we have. It's he didn't get these shilas. He wrote a sefer in question and answer form. That's the tshuvas. But either way, almost every Trumas Hadeshen is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. Very important sefer. Says the Trumas Hadeshen, v'nira de toch shlosha lo chashav lo meis leis. Not like the Rush. No, you don't go by meis leis. If a woman has a baby on Wednesday, 10 minutes before Shkia, then Thursday is already day 2, and Friday is day 3. It's a big chumrah. But the Trumas Hadeshen says you don't go by meis leis. You go by calendaric days, like Mixas Yom Kikulo. Elahanach shlosha chashvina lefi seder hayamim. You go by the days. Umiyad kishenichnas yom revi'i l'leidasa. Right when day 4 halachic calendar day comes, mikri la'achar shlosha. It's called after 3 days after the calendaric day. The boy maze of Avagad Ashiri Barak Ruba. Even though I know the Rush in source 38 that he wrote me'es leis from the birth. B'Tosfos Baba Kama lo ratzel atari tzachi because of the dochak lomer debein me'es leis. Tosfos says the Trumas Hadeshen seems to argue. V'im Tomar, and says the Trumas Hadeshen, okay, you're telling me that I'm being a machmir, and if there's a machlokas aposkim, to go lekula safik nefashos lahakel. So even if I'm arguing with the Rush, so go by the Rush. If you want to tell me, yeah, you can go by the Rush. V'im Tomar b'neima kivadika plukta duravasa b'savik nefashos lahakel. So maybe you should be makel against me. Says the Trumas Hadeshen, Kivan da Ashiri lo kasav the Baya me'es leis. Elakadei liyashiv alachas gedolos leil. He's just saying it. If you look at the context, he's doing it to explain a bahag. V'yahab pligi revafas v'ri, and we argue on that sheet of the bahag anyway. V'kivan dolas alachas gedolos nisroa hayisod shal psaku ashiri. The whole line in the Rush, if you look closely in the context, is explaining a sheet that we don't paskin like. And if that's true, then the whole Yisod falls away, and therefore the Trumas Hadeshen says you can pass like me, but the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Brura, after the dust settles, we pass in the Kula. The Shulchan Aruch is machmer, like the Trumas Hadeshen. Shulchan Aruch, in 7 Tafresh Yud Zayin, this is Hilchos Yom Kippur. The Yamim Elu Emonin Osam Me'es La'es, says the Shulchan Aruch in source number 40. Right, you don't count Me'es La'es in this regard. Kagon, from the event. If somebody had a baby the night of the 7th of Tishrei, you don't give automatic, because that's considered within 3 days. It's considered within 7 days. But you go by exactly, even though, really, until into Yom Kippur, right, you still have those 72 hours. No, you don't go by 72 hours. You don't go by 72 hours when it comes to this halacha. You go by the calendaric day. Mishum tekivan shenichnas yom revi lelei dasa mikri la'achar shlosha. That's the Shulchan Aruch, like the Trumas Hadeshen. But the Mishnah Brura paskins lakula like the Rush. Says the Mishnah Brura, we're not going to be machmer in this case. He quotes in the Gra is Megam game also on the Trumas Hadeshen. V'nimsa, you see in the middle of source 41. V'nimsa lafiza the bein le'inyan melecha Shabbos u'bein le'inyan Yom Kippurim. Whether it's Shabbos Yom Kippur ad shlosha me'es le'es chashvinan lo l'musukenes until 72 hours. Musukenes, that's within 3 days. Umutter afilu lo amar tzrichani, and it's mutter even if she does not say I need. Umishlosh ad shiva me'es le'es shamar tzrichani, as we said. V'nira d'linu Yom Kippurim bevadai yisadei lohakel to safek nefashosu. Safek nefashos, we're mekel. If you have feeling in Shabbos gamkein, imlon is dami lo az over gilium lasosa de yado shara de Yisrael. The Mishnah Brura is mekel. Mishnah Brura is mekel like the Rush. You have 72 hours, and then you have 7 days that go by the moment of the birth, not calendar. Ravadia also is mekel, and Ravadia, this is classic Ravadia. Ravadia quotes many. It's not just the Rush. It's another 20 Rishonim, and the Ravadia says, if the Shulchan Aruch had known all the Rishonim that agree with the Rush, he would have passed in that way too. That's a classic Rav Avadia. That's what he says. Rav Avadia says this in Yabia Omer in source 42 right here on top. Hare lefanenu lahakas harishonim chevel neviim the svirlu debina meis leis. So many Rishonim allow meis leis. Ubevadai she'ilu ra'a marana Shulchan Aruch divrei kol Rishonim and Iskarim la'el. If the Shulchan Aruch had seen the whole list of Rishonim, bahag ve'eshkol v'rash v'rit v'or z'rov v'esav v'heter to kulus v'yelu to be in a meis leis hayaposek k'divreihem. He would have paskin like them, not like one Trumas Hadeshen. All these Rishonim. V'shalok k'divrei Trumas Hadeshen shecher bazeh uveprat b'savik nefashos l'hakel. And therefore, you, not only could you be making against the Shulchan Aruch, Ravadia said the Shulchan Aruch would have agreed. Hamur mikol amar shioledes. Toch shloshiyam. Within 3 days, it's for sure. Meis leis b'shas haleda. The hainu b'toch shiv mishayim shows within 72 hours of the birth. Afilu hi omer she bria v'yachol esano. She says, I'm healthy. You tell her you're not allowed to fast. You're not allowed to fast, even if the doctors say it and she says it. Rav Nisa Karelitz in Chut Hashani wonders if you have the same measurements and times by a cesarean section birth. By a cesarean section birth. There are differences in halacha by cesarean section birth. A cesarean section birth, it's a suffix feka dedina from the Gemara Masechah Shabbos about bris milah. About bris milah on Shabbos. If a woman has a cesarean section on Shabbos, the following Shabbos should be the bris. We don't do it that Shabbos. Because it could be that cesarean section, the bris milah is not on day 8, but on day 1. That's a machlokas in Masechah Shabbos around Kuf Lamed Hey. And that's why, if you have something about a bris, what do? You always do it the later date. So either the mitzvah is today, the day of birth, or a week later, Shabbos. But you can't do it either of those days. So when do you do it? The following Sunday, which is for sure the wrong day. It's not day 8, but you don't have a choice. And it's better to do it a day late than a week early. And that's why cesarean section has differences in halacha. So what about this case in terms of sakana? So the Chut Hashani says, hayoledes. Ayedei nitua kesari, hari besakana, umchal Shabbos for she's besakana, and you have to be mechal Shabbos for her. What about the 3 and the 7 days? Yesh ladun. Is she called a yoledes in this way? Im chashiva ki yoledes kivan de'inla risuk evarm gomer. She doesn't have the same event that took place that shook her bones coming out. So maybe she should have less. But then he says, no, what? Maybe she should have more because this was a surgery. This was a surgery, and sometimes often she's even weaker by a cesarean section, even though she didn't do all the pushing out, but she had surgery. Avo be'emes gara yoser tekivan she'avra haleda yedei nituach dina kimusukenes yoser mishlosha yamim v'akol lefi ha'inyan. Even after 3 days, maybe she's called misukenes yesh bo sakana, and therefore it would be automatic. The bir halacha is interesting. The Mishnah Brura we said before is mekel, like the shita of many Rishonim, like Rav Avadia said. The Bir Halacha, he's more mach like the Shulchan Aruch. But it seems to be the Maskana, we passing like the Mishnah Brura in the Mishnah Brura, not the Mishnah Brura in the Bir Halacha. The Bir Halacha says here in 44, again, when do you count the 3 days from? Remember the Rambam said by all these Sadam Lakula, when it starts, and now when it ends. So he says maybe you should go by 3 halachic days. Im nimshach yeshivas al mashmer yom echad l'mchalanav ki im shnei yom achrei leida. V'yaf al pikin im nimshach kar l'shlosh yom lo yoda ina b'chal zeh v'chula. Shmir Shabbos paskins l'kula like the Chafetz Chaim in the Mishnah Brura. 45 b'meshach shlosh yom shim ayin beis sha'os migemar leidas havlad. 72 hours from the end. The birth could go for 2 days. From the end of the birth. Yesh li'yoledet in chol sheyesh bo sakana. You don't go by the beginning of the birth, and you don't go by the limited view of the Trumas Hadeshin. So you go by Mekel in these cases. Umuto Chalal Shabbos, B'chol Darash Mishu, Shebaki Ksas, Binyane, Refua, Gon Chavruseha, Roebo, sorry, whatever they need. Good. So now that Baruch Hashem, the baby is born. What's the first thing that many times happens? Nursing. So nursing issues relating to Shabbos. So are there halachic issues? So a woman nurses her baby on Shabbos, that's mutter. That's his eating. And there's no malacha being done if it goes straight into the mouth. And it never has the status. What would be the potential malacha? What's the potential malacha? Mifarek. Squeezing out something from its natural source. Squeezing out a fruit. Milking a cow. The Rambam says, wounding. That's the Rambam Shita. That's against other Rishonim. The Malach of Chovel, the Rambam says, is Mefarek, which is a tolda of dash, threshing, getting out the liquid that's inside. So this resembles that type of activity. So are there any limitations? So let's see. The Tosefta says that a woman cannot express milk into a cup on Shabbos. And that's the malacha of Mefarek. Lo takel isha, 46. Lo takel isha midadea v'tachlo lo tachakos lo tachgarav tanagazman. She can't. Why would she be doing this? Maybe it's to ease the pain, especially at the beginning, right after a birth. The milk comes in after a few days, and it's painful if the woman doesn't nurse, expresses milk. The Shulchan Aruch says she cannot put it into a cup in order to give to her child. She could go directly into the mouth, right? If she's regular. If when the child suckles and the nurses from the woman, so that's fine, that's mutter. But putting it into a cup to give to him, that is not allowed. The Mishnah Berurah says, "V'tanik mishum mefarik." So what happens if the baby's not nursing? The baby is being stubborn. So sometimes if the mother squeezes out a little bit of milk, that could help. So the Shulchan Aruch says that you could squeeze out a little milk. The only question is, where are you squeezing that little milk? Right, the Shulchan Aruch just says, "Mutter lisha lekalecha." You could start the flow a little bit, so it wakes up the child. The child's going to remember. Oh, nursing, I like this. But what is that referring to? So, Mefarshim explained that it's based on the next Shulchan Aruch, source 50, Shin Lamed, v'hiba atzma yichol lotzi biyada hachalav hamitza'erosa. Right, if there is tsa'ar, she's allowed to express milk. Where is this milk going? Says the Mishnah Brura al Haaretz. If it's called holech le'ibud. The malacha of dash is where you want and you are saving what you are squeezing out. But if it is going straight le'ibud, is going to ruin, then it is mutter. Why is it mutter? You're doing the act, you're separating the liquid from its natural place. So, 2 points. Number one, says the Mishnah Brura, 51. Why is it mutter? Number one, ein zeh kederech mafarek ki v'sholach le'ibud. It's not the derech of the malacha. Right? Usually, what's the malacha? You want what you squeezed out. Here, it's going to the floor. So it's not even the tzur of the malacha. That might be mutter legamre, without any dechia. Right? It's not the malacha. The malacha is defined as you're taking something that you want. And number two, similar idea, but maybe it's a malacha nesricha legufa. Right? When do you usually mefarek? They squeezed out because they wanted the blood. They want it from the chilazon, whatever it is. They squeeze something out to get to what they wanted. But here, you're squeezing it out to remove it. So that's a malacha, she'en tzricha legufa, for a different malacha that was done in the Mishkan. So it's derabanan, we paskin, and derabanan, b'makam tsar of the woman, lo gazru. So that's why it is allowed. For sure, the Mishnah Berurah explains that Shulchan Aruch al Haaretz, right, where it's holech le'ibud. The Avnei Nezer is more makel. He says if you're going to throw it out right afterwards, then you could put it something that's hard to express straight onto the ground. What's the woman's just going to lean over and drip onto the ground? So that's a little hard. Sometimes she has to put it into a kli and then throw out the kli. So the Avnei Nezer in the tshuva, the Sachat Shavar seems to say that's mutter if you're going to throw it out right afterwards. Shirnis Tapek 52. Mashenoagin noshim shemitzta'aros mechelban lahakel mechalav, that it hurts to express the milk. Hadim first bar zarua muter lachol alakarka on the ground. V'yavsha choli bekli. Ve'ena mashka holich liba b'shasa chaliva. And even if you put into a kli, it's not going to go ibud right away. Some could be make a leave by a kli. Generally, we don't rely on that straight out. You could do it into a kli, but have it ruined. Have it ruined right away. Right? The Bechazon Ish in 53 does not think that you should put it directly in the kli. Right? It's kind of like if you have kavana to do something afterwards, it doesn't change. You're not allowed to squeeze out a lemon on Shabbos onto liquids. But what if I'm going to put it on a liquid and then I'm going to put it onto a solid? It doesn't matter. The first step is answer. So here, right when you put it into the kli, it's going to be answer. So it says the Chazon Ish, Afim cholev amanas lishpoch liibud nira dechayev kivan tehu bekli va'avid demimlach. Maybe he'll switch and change his mind. V'robnei adam ein ma'adin chashamashke. And most people think this is a liquid already. Stop time. You've done the malacha. So what do? What you could do is, what a woman does is, let's say she wants to express the milk, put a little soap at the bottom of the bottle that's connected to the breast pump. If you put a little soap in there, so right away it becomes ruined. So holich leibud, that's a holich leibud case that it is mutter. That's what the poskim say. Shmir Shabbos writes in 54. Meinekes sheish la odav chalav, a meinekes that has a lot of milk. He's sovelas b'shal kacha, and she's in pain. She's in pain. So we mentioned before that she could start the nursing. I don't know if I mentioned before. If she wants to just drip some on the baby's mouth in order to wake the baby up and remind the baby to nurse, that's allowed. That's allowed also. That's called nursing in the spot. Nursing in the spot. That's not called on the ground. But the Shmir Shabbos says if you're nursing into a cup or just to express the milk because it's painful, so then what do? If you can't just put it onto the ground or into the sink, you can even use a breast pump, right? If it's manual or even if it's electric, you can put it on a timer. That's what some do. Right? It's connected to a Shabbos clock. At the masheva at b'shal mechuvanos at specific times. V'yesh lasim bekli shebo yasev achalav chomer makalka. You have to put into it some ruining substance. Kugon mei sabon, soap. Kadosh yelech miyad liibud. V'yin lo chomer kazeh. And if you don't have the soap, everybody has some soap. But if you don't, somebody has something to ruin it. So you do a little bit at a time, a drop. Takpil shov kamos ktana. Tishpoch az achalav shneasaf az tamshich. So that's what nursing, generally, a woman who is nursing. A woman can't, let's say she has a lot of milk. She wants to save the milk. She wants to nurse. Put the pump into a bag and then put it in the freezer. Can't do that on Shabbos. On Shabbos, it's only mutter, holich liibud. Holich liibud. Therefore, put some soap in it, or not even. It's best not to put it regular and then throw it out. No, dafka put the soap in the bottom, so it's ruined. So it's ruined right away. So this is the second half of our discussion of keeping the woman calm in labor. And when does labor finish? And the halachas after labor, about how long she has to, she's called the cholosh yesh basakana, ein basakana, 3, 7, and 30. Those were the shiurim. After 30, she's destroyed like everybody else. And putting the at ease and nursing issues that come up, everybody should be zochet to have many, many children and grandchildren throughout their lives to get a lot of nachas. Okay, we will stop here. Next time we'll pick it up with the next topic in this volume, which is other related emergencies on Shabbos.